Alright, time for me to determine what length I want to make each one of my little chains that hangs down off my guard. And also I want to talk about the chain. I went to Home Depot. Of course, they have all different kinds of chain. And some of the factors I needed to consider were obviously cost. I wanted to keep it kind of cheap. Didn't want a chain that was too flimsy, so that if the chain gets snagged on saplings and things, it's not going to be ripped off too easily. Also didn't want a chain that was too light, or else it wouldn't really do much of a job as a barrier. And then when you get into really heavy chain, then you run into the problem of cost getting really high, and it's a little harder to work with. So I was looking at all the chain they had on the shelf there, and then I came across this chain right here. Oddly enough, this chain is called barrier chain. That's what the name on the sign said. And I thought, I wonder if they call this barrier chain because it's used for that kind of a job. You know, maybe it acts as a guard. I don't know. Not sure why they call it barrier chain, but I looked at it and I said, you know, it's not too expensive. It's kind of sturdy. It's got small links, which is nice, so that I think that's going to be better as far as giving it a little more flexibility and also ability to avoid getting snagged on a lot of stuff. But anyways, this is what I decided to settle on, was barrier chain. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to figure out how long I want to cut it, and then I'm going to start making my cuts. And I'm going to cut this with bolt cutters. So I don't know if I got enough. We'll find out. I'll hang as many as I can, and then if I have to, I'll go back and buy more at a later date. But you know, obviously I'm going to lose one link for every time I have to cut this. But we'll see how it works out. Well, I ran out of chain, but funny how things work out. I ended up with just enough to make a length of chain for every other hook. I couldn't have planned that if I tried. Well, anyways, at least now I know when I go back to the store I can pretty much order the same length of chain that I ordered the first time, and I'll have enough left to finish it. But I'm gonna bash down the S hooks and get all these hooked on there good and mount it the way it is, and for the time being I'm just going to use it that way. Here, my guard's ready to install, but I'm going to change gears and I'm going to put my wheel assembly back on so I can keep the implement on the tractor and lift it up, put that on, and then maybe I'll take it off the tractor to put the guard on. But I'd like to lift this a little higher than this has been lifting. I was thinking of maybe changing something here on the 3-point setup that's on here. And the way it is right now, I guess I could take this bolt out and run it through a couple of links of chain up higher on each side the way this is set up, and that would definitely give me more lift. Or I could take this big bolt out and move this to this outer position here. That would also give me more lift. But that would also have a tendency to want to be pulling these arms in towards the middle more, which I don't really want to do. Maybe that wouldn't make a difference either. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. Alright, decided to take a measurement before I change anything just to see how much of a difference it makes. So I got it in the full up position right now, and distance from the bottom of this plate about just over 14 inches to the ground. About 14¼ inches to the ground. So now, while I move this large bolt to the rear position here, and as soon as I did that, I went over to the other side and realized they're different. These are different. So, I don't know if, see, there's 1, 2, 3 holes, 4 holes in this one. And there's 1, 2, looks like there's only 2 holes in that one. I don't know. I don't know if one of them was changed out at one point or if that's by design. Huh. Well, I got in this position. I'll raise it for the hell of it, see what happens. Yeah, Kind of figured that was going to happen. Definitely got more lift out of it by doing that, but it's lifting that side more. So, all right, that ain't going to be the way to do it. I'm going to have to shorten up these chains. Ever have one of those days where it seems like everything's just being a real pain in the butt? Well, unbolted this and tried to lower the chain down and run the bolt through these two links here. The problem is these other links on the bottom get in the way, so that in order to do that I could do it, but I didn't end up having to put a larger bolt in here, a longer bolt. And a couple of problems with that. I don't have any longer bolts this size right now. Secondly, the other problem is a longer bolt's going to be more likely to just want to bend from the strain. So I don't want to do that. So I don't like that at all. So I'm thinking the way to go about rectifying this problem is, and I'm not doing it today because I don't want to get all tied up in another project. I really want to focus on the mower. Anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to at some point take these metal plates off of here and drill a couple more holes in there so that I can actually adjust what position these plates are located in. I can either drill small holes for these and move this bolt up, but then I get the same problem with the chains getting in the way. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some larger holes that will slide over the pin here, and then I can just do my quick disconnect and slide those plates up onto the different positions. So I'll do that some other day, because that involves unscrewing this, taking this off, and drilling through this plate steel, which is going to take a little while. So, alright, I'll just get it lifted up as high as I can, and if I have to, I'll put my floor jack under the back there so I can work on this rear wheel assembly. Alright, here's my fork assembly that I previously straightened out. And I had my machinist neighbor, he came through for me again. He made up a bushing that fits in there nice for this side, and then he also made up a little piece to go in on this side, which I've got over there, and between the two of them it's gonna take care of a lot of that sloppiness of the new axle. This is just a piece of metal like shim that he made up to tighten up this side. This side wasn't that bad, so that's what I'm going to go with. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mount my hub assembly into the wheel here. Alright, I just put a couple in here to hold the thing in position while I drive these two home, but this seems like the perfect application for thread lock, and I wish I had the heavier duty stuff, the red thread lock, but all I've got handy is the blue Loctite 242, which I figure that's better than nothing. Okay, got my nitrile gloves, got my grease. Time to pack the wheel bearings. I'll start by just using the brush and putting a liberal coating of grease on the race, or the seat, whatever you want to call it. Now I'm going to don nitrile gloves, and I can't run the camera while I'm doing this because I'll get the camera all greasy. But just to give you an idea of what I'm going to do, take the bearing and literally scoop the grease out with my fingers and push it in through the outside here. Push the grease through, push the grease in through here as best I can to give it a good start. And then of course once it's all installed, I'll pump grease into that fitting and make sure I get grease in there. Now that I've got the bearing installed, I'm going to install one of the seals. Now I'm just going to put a flat piece of metal over the bearing and very carefully tap it with a dead blow mallet to try and get it to seat without damaging it. Okay, now the seal's installed. That'll keep that bearing from falling completely out of the hub when I flip this wheel over to put my other bearing in. And then of course then this spacer ends up going in here like that, but I'll leave the spacer out for now. Right now I have the seals installed and the spacers installed on both sides. This side actually doesn't go in as far. The bearing seat isn't in as far. It's kind of interesting. Well, now the moment of truth, whether or not that's going to fit between the two forks. Alright, took some fussing, but I was able to get it together. Problem was that the shim that was on this side was a little too thick, so I had to use the bench grinder and grind it down thinner so that it would fit in there. And the other problem is, as I would tap this side in, the force of tapping, even with the dead blow mallet, was dislodging this seal. It was actually causing the bearing to slap out of the inner race there and bang the bearing, the seal out of place. But I was able to get the seal back in, got it all together. Now I've got this cinched up about this far. I could definitely tighten it more, but what I want to do is I want to actually mount the tail wheel assembly back on the mower so that I can see how much play is in that wheel, because I don't want to over tighten this and end up having these spacers push in and put too much of a load on those bearings. Okay, so the threads are damaged on the lower edge of this this threaded part of the spindle. So the nut only goes on so far, and then basically there's a large space there that allows it to shift up and down. And I don't remember if that's how it was when I got it or not, or whether or not I had another spacer in here that I misplaced. Because this is all I have that I recall taking off, was this stack of 3 big washers that went on top here. And I don't think there was anything on the bottom either. But I've got this washer that had some kind of rough shape, but it's one of the only really huge washers I have hanging around here. This is actually off of the original 1-inch welded up spindle that I took apart, so might as well put it to use, and I'll stick that on there, and I'll tighten the nut up as best as I can. Basically what's going to happen is when the weight's on there, it's not going to be an issue, but every time you lift the cutter up, the wheel's going to drop down a little bit. Might not be a big issue, but I'm probably going to see whether or not my neighbor's got some stock. He can make up a spacer for me to make that right so it stays tight all the time. Kind of like what he made for me here, being probably a good idea. So I'm going to put this washer and tighten the nut up as best I can. Alright, so you can still see the excessive play due to the fact that that spindle's so worn. I mean, that's really sloppy, so I think I'm going to have to come up with something to fix that up. But I think for the time being, I might just run it like that. This wheel seems to be turning well, so I'm going to tighten that nut up a little more until I start to get a little bit of resistance, and then I'll back it back off, and hopefully that'll give me a decent preload on the bearings. Okay, now I'm going to load it up with grease. Got a grease fitting, got a Zerk fitting on this side, and there's one on this side here, and I probably have to pump quite a bit of grease in there to fill that void on the back sides of the bearings in the middle of that hub. It seemed like a pretty good sized void that you have to fill with grease before it's going to actually start pushing any grease into the bearings. So I'll start pumping away. Oops. Well, I was pumping away, and obviously I put too much grease in there and actually pushed the seal right out. But truth be told, I was already not too happy about how easy that seal seemed to be popping out just from me banging on the bolt before. I just don't think that seal is a really good press fit into that hub like it should be. And the two seals came together in the same package, so go figure. But I'm going to scrape that excess grease off and see if I can't reseat that seal. Oh, what a pain. Can't get the seal back in because the grease is behind there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to I'm going to unscrew this Zerk fitting and let some grease push out of there, and then reseat the seal and let whatever excess grease needs to come out of there. But I know what's going to happen as soon as this heats up. You know, it's pretty cool today, in the 30s. And this warms up because it's working, or for whatever reason, it's going to make that grease expand. It's going to want to pop that stupid seal right back out again. So, in my opinion, this is not a good design. You know, because I mean, the only way you know you've got enough grease in there, really, is to see it squeeze out somewhere, and it doesn't want to squeeze out through the seal. It wants to squeeze. I mean, that one's holding like a son of a gun. And I put about as many pumps in each side evenly to try and make sure it went in evenly, but this one's just not staying in there. I guess I could rig up some kind of a spacer that I could take this whole thing apart and put a spacer in there that would go between the inside wall here of the fork and the outside of that seal, and actually keep that seal in place. But I shouldn't have to do that. But then again, just because I shouldn't have to do it doesn't mean I'm not going to. But let's try and relieve some pressure first. Okay, I unscrewed the Zerk fitting, and it took a dump of about that much grease on my finger. And then there was a big pop noise. So there was a big air bubble in there. So it wasn't necessarily completely filled with grease, just air. So maybe now I'll leave this out, reseat that seal, and maybe hopefully that air getting out of there and this grease getting out of there will keep it together. Well, got it back together. I'll just have to keep a close eye on that. Let's see what happens. That's the seal with it's the seal on the side where the nut is. Of course, it'll be easy to spot. It's the one with all the grease around it. Although I can wipe some of that. Alright, here's my homemade chain guard mounted. Missing, of course, the chain that I didn't have enough of. And I ended up skipping every other one. And then over here, I kind of messed up. I lost track of what I was crimping, so I got the two together there. But who cares? This isn't a beauty pageant. That's for sure. Looking at this thing. Well, let's see. If it performs half decent, maybe this spring when the weather turns warm, I'll treat it to a coat of paint. Look at that. Whole nother layer of metal getting ready to come off there. Has rust. So probably not a bad idea if I do get some paint on this thing at some point. If nothing else, it'll make it look prettier. And I got one bolt here that I got stuck in there pretty good right now, and it's because the holes didn't line up exactly the way I wanted them to, and I tried driving it in and get it wedged in there, and I already put my punches away, so I'll just leave it in there. Well, the sun is actually still pretty high in the sky. Well, not exactly, but point being is I'm looking for an excuse to go out there and try this thing, which is what everybody who's been watching these videos is probably waiting to see.